Perfect. Hey everybody, I'm Lulu Kesin. I'm the sports editor of the Massachusetts Daily Collegian, and I've been covering UMass women's basketball for 2 years now.
How's it going? I'm J.J Post. I write for The Observer. I also cover Notre Dame women's basketball for NDTV, and I've been doing it for 1 year.
Awesome. So yes, UMass and Notre Dame face off in round one of the NCAA tournament tonight at 7:30. So obviously this is not Notre Dame's first tournament appearance, but I'm just curious, in your opinion and from your perspective, kind of what makes this year different from past years for them.
Well, for starters, obviously it's the new coach. It's the Niele Ivey era, and that on itself gives this team a new kind of feeling because this is Ivey's first tournament as coach. And I think for a couple of years now, she's been here 2 years. It's kind of been building up to this. Like you could see the team growing as the years went on. The first year, there was promise, but there weren't results. This year, there were flashes. That win over North Carolina State, for example. Where you could really see what this team was getting at. But you still feel like they haven't reached the level they want to be at yet. You still feel like they're getting there. There's games like the Louisville game where they looked entirely outmatched the first half. Those games still pop up. And I think this tournament's really going to be a good indicator of, where this Notre Dame team is in the progression of their Ivy. Because, they're not, it's not like last year where they're not a good team. They're a good team. But I think this is the tournament where we figure out what their ceiling is because they've shown they could beat a North Carolina State, but they've also shown they could get run out of the gym by Louisville. So I think this is going to be a real interesting kind of benchmark for this team. And I think that kind of intrigue, that sense of, prior Notre Dame teams, you usually know where they stand heading into the tournament. Under Muff McGraw, Notre Dame was an established force. Every year they're going to be a contender. And I think this Notre Dame team is no less talented than those Muff McGraw teams, but I think it's a team that there's a lot more uncertainty as to how they're going to come into each game. Are they going to play up to their competition? Are they going to play down to their competition? Are they going to come out shooting the lights out? Are they going to come out not being able to buy a basket? These are the questions that Notre Dame hasn't been able to consistently answer all year. And I think if they come out playing their best basketball, I think they can make a Final Four. If they don't, I think they get eliminated in the first round.
Gotcha. And kind of going off of that, obviously you talked about how Notre Dame has some inexperience under their coaching, but in reality, compared to UMass hasn't been in the tournament since in 1998. So 24 years. Experience kind of can play a factor. It also can be thrown out the window come March Madness time. I think everybody has seen that happen in both the men's and women's side so far. But just out of curiosity, or how much do you think experience will play a factor specifically, versus this up and coming UMass team that has proven they deserve to be in this tournament, but obviously haven't been dancing as recently as Notre Dame has?
I think it'll play a big role, but I'm interested in seeing to what extent. Because I think for Notre Dame, it can be both a positive and negative factor. This team, this is a young team by all stretches of the imagination. Their leading scorer, Olivia Miles, is a freshman. Sonia Citron, not even 18 yet, is like playing like 30 minutes a game. 4 of the 5 starters are, assuming that they go with the lineup they usually go with, are underclassmen, or with the exception of Maya Dodson, who's a graduate student, as well as Darren Mabry, another senior. But this is a team that I think has pros and cons of being a young team. It's a mostly, not undersized. It's mostly underaged core in terms of like you're looking at this UMass team that has a lot of experience. I don't know if that's going to be a help or a problem because it could lead to them coming off a lot of energy. This is a team that thinks they can take on the world. They're ready to take on the world. They think they can prove people wrong, and they have done so. But it's also a team that we've seen in the big moments kind of get overwhelmed. I'll go back to the Louisville game, kind of the key example. That was the game like against number 3 team in the country at home. The crowds are stands, and they kind of shrunk in the moment. I think this is a team that hasn't faced a lot of, bright lights moments before. And this is a season where they've kind of been starting to face more and more of them. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how they come out in tournament game. It's not a home game. This is a team that has excelled at home. So I'm interested to see if the youthfulness of the team is going to make them more energetic. It's going to show their fire, their fight, because this is a team that wants to prove everyone wrong. They want to come up with a lot of energy. Or could it be, something that brings them down, something that, they kind of shrink once the lights get bright, once the tournament comes around. It's the big dance. It's a UMass team that's going to put everything on the line. It's the first tournament appearance in 24 years, I think. So they're going to be playing for everything. They're going to, be hustling. And this Notre Dame team that's going to need to play their best basketball to match that because, it's a zero-sum game in March. You win or you go home. And I think that's going to be a test to see, whether the experience comes through as a positive. It's going to give them that extra burst, that extra fight, or it's going to be a negative. It's going to make them back down. I think so. Experience will play a big role. I'm just not sure whether it's going to be a plus for UMass or a plus for Notre Dame.
Gotcha. And speaking of Olivia Miles, Tori Verdi, the UMass coach, kind of compared her game to his player, Destiny Faloxi, a little bit. However, she's Olivia's 5'10", if I'm not mistaken, and Destiny is a generous 5'7", I like to say. How do you expect Olivia to kind of use her height, or I guess how does she kind of use her height at the guard position? I mean, 5'10" isn't huge, but it's also it's a 5'10" guard. That obviously is something.
Yeah, no, I think Olivia Miles in kind of the Olivia Miles has been probably the player on the Irish team I think has gotten the most hype over the year. If I want to use that term, like, a player that people really have, highlighted as a young talent that's gonna be a player to watch down the road. And a lot of that hype has come over her assist numbers. Obviously, she's a fantastic creator. She can pass the ball great. She's had these incredible behind the back assists in transition. That's her calling card. But I think in that kind of got lost that she's a great scorer as well. And what really makes her great is she can attack the rim at a level that I don't think you see many freshmen 10. I don't think you see many point guards able to do, because she uses that height. I guess that you call it a deceptive 5'10", because you don't expect a freshman point guard to be going in there, getting to the rim, getting up and putting up N1s, but she likes to do that. She's got a really good first step. She's quick on the ball, which makes her great. She likes to get to the top of the key, isolate in a one-on-one situation, and then drive right past to get to the rim. And I think that's something that Notre Dame likes to use because against a team like UMass, where you only 6 players usually of the rotation, they like to drive the lane. I assume in this game, they're going to want Olivia Miles to get to the rim, draw some fouls, because, either it's going to get her to the line, get her, 3 shots at the basket, or it's going to get, UMass in the foul trouble. And they want to, stretch that rotation as thin as possible, tire them out, get them in foul trouble. So I think that's characteristic of Miles that I think, plays into her height really well. The fact that she's not just 5'10", but she also can use it well. She's not afraid to, go up against the center, put the ball up, try to draw contact, try to get to the rim. I think that's something that I think really, highlights, what makes her special as a freshman. She has that, killer instinct, that drive. She's not afraid to, blow by a defender, go right up against a bigger defender and put the ball in the hoop. And I think that's kind of the, what's made her so good to be a leader of this team at such a young age.
Absolutely. And both Notre Dame and UMass faced Boston College this year. UMass played them once at home, and then Notre Dame played twice and split the series. So kind of just what did you make of those games? It's not necessarily rare that 2 NCAA, tournament opponents shared an opponent in the regular season, because matchups can be so random. But I think the BC game might mean something to both of these teams in terms of figuring each other out. So kind of just what did you make of the win and the loss to BC?
Yeah, I will caveat the loss to BC. I was unable to watch the game because ESPN decided to brilliantly black out the game in the campus of the away team. But I did have a radio broadcast, and I trust the good people at WVFI with their analysis. Basically, I think the Boston College loss came down to sloppiness more than anything else. It was a game that Notre Dame had their chance to win. Final 30 seconds, Notre Dame had 3 different possessions in which they had a chance to take the lead or win the game outright at the buzzer. And, the first one was an offensive foul. Olivia Miles fouled out. The second chance, they missed a layup, which, uncharacteristic for a team that's usually pretty efficient. And then the third chance at the buzzer, they missed a jumper from inside the paint. Those are 3 looks that Notre Dame, will want to score. These are not like, 30 foot against in your face defense. These are looks that Notre Dame wants to, get, and just none of them fell. And of course, in the Boston College level, credit to them, they shot the lights out that game. Cameron Schwartz, I believe was shooting over 60% from behind the arc, and then kind of going to the win. Boston College kind of regressed the mean a bit from behind the arc, and I think Notre Dame was able to settle in a little more. Schwartz at that point went 1 for 9 from distance in South Bend. I think without that kind of you talk about spacing the floor and having to respect spacing against Boston College in Chestnut Hill, Notre Dame wasn't able to, do anything in regards to, they had to make sure someone was, constantly harassing behind the arc. And once Schwartz kind of cooled down in South Bend, went 5 for 17 from the field, that was kind of a sign that Notre Dame could back off a little bit. They could play their game, protect the paint a little more, which, is something this team kind of has struggles with because they only really have one true paint protector in Maya Dotson. I think once they were able to, back off, be playing perimeter defense, get Maya Dotson some help down low, they were able to kind of establish themselves. And, the game at home, I think they both came in with kind of that mentality that we're not going to let this happen again. We think we're better than Boston College. We're going to come out and show it. And, from quarter to quarter to quarter, they played that way. So I think from a mental standpoint, it helped that they kind of got that loss right in their back mind and they knew what they wanted to be heading into the game. I also think it helped that they were able to just establish themselves because Boston College wasn't playing an excellent game. All credit to them in Chestnut Hill. They were playing a terrific game, but at some point the regression of the mean had to happen. And thankfully for Notre Dame, it did happen in that second game.
Gotcha. And lastly, just kind of plain and simple from your perspective, what do you think Notre Dame has to do as a team to beat UMass tonight?
Yeah. So I think that the first thing we kind of already talked about, which is get Olivia Miles active early. Because I think Olivia Miles, really on a lot of levels is the key to this team. She's kind of the, the heartbeat of this team. She's got energy. She's the player that's on the ball. She plays with a lot of heart, a lot of passion. I think when she's in the game, everyone's in the game. It's easy to kind of get behind Olivia Miles. Like even against Louisville, when it was like in the worst, possible moment, I think they were down 44-5. Olivia Miles got into a tie up with the ball, and they got into like a little yelling match from the Louisville players. Suddenly Notre Dame went on like a 12-2 run. And obviously that game, it was out of reach. They were never coming back in that game. But I think that's kind of a very small testament to, even in the worst moments, when Olivia Miles can get fired up and get into the game, the rest of the team kind of follows her lead. And I think that's, very important from a mental aspect. Also from, just a tactical aspect. I think Olivia Miles is the player that, Neil Ivey knows that she can exploit UMass the most with. Because, we talked about it earlier. So 5'10" point guard, you could do a lot of that with that. She's a good enough shooter that, UMass has to respect her shooting, and they're not going to give her any space on the perimeter. But she also has that kind of speed to get the lane, try to draw some contact, try to get UMass's depth into trouble early with fouls. And I think if they can do that, they stretch UMass thin. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, 4 players like to usually play 35 or more minutes. If they can, force some of that depth to come into the game, play more minutes, eat up more minutes, I think Notre Dame will try to exploit the fact that they have a little better depth, top to bottom. I think the roster for Notre Dame, you can find a little more contributors deeper down the roster. And if it goes to blow, I think Notre Dame's going to trust that if they can go to their bench will get it done. Because, you've had players on the Notre Dame bench, all season who kind of stepped up and come in, Naya Peoples, against Miami, obviously was a losing effort, but she came in when she was called upon and had a very good game, quietly, so players like Sam Brunell as well, players that, aren't necessarily in the starting lineup, but when they're put in, they can put in the shift. And I think the LIV is going to know if a game goes blow to blow, if it goes foul for foul, and you have to start kind of, tinkering with your lineup, getting players in and out. I think she'll trust that, the back of her bench will come in and do a better job in the back of UMass bench, because I think they're a little more tested. I think they're a little more experienced in these situations, because Notre Dame has, you look at the NC State game, you look at the Miami game, had to rely on some of their 6-7 players on the bench a little more. So that, and I also think Maya Dodson will be key, because, like I said, Notre Dame only really uses like one rim protector, in the simplest sense of the word. Maddie Westbeld, also a forward, but Maddie Westbeld's a little more of a stretch forward. They like to get her active from beyond the arc. So I think Maya Dotson's a player that, is kind of a pure rebounder, a pure paint presence. And I think if they can, because UMass is a good rebounding team, so she's going to have a big task, a big role to play. And if she can play that role well, if she can, be active, be on the boards and, hold her own against a UMass team that's going to look to be swarming the paint, swarming the boards, I think Notre Dame can control the tempo a little more. They can probably try to pick up the tempo, because they know Notre Dame's a team that can score. And I think they know they get this game into a shootout, they hold a better chance. So I think they're going to let Maya get on the boards. She can control the tempo. Notre Dame can control the tempo. And I think they're going to look to, push it up more and more. And I think they think if they push it up more and more, they should win this game.
Alrighty, awesome. Thank you again for chatting. And for those who are listening to this, just a reminder that UMass and Notre Dame will play in Norman, Oklahoma tonight at 7:30. I believe it's on ESPN2 or U. Yep. ESPN2. Alrighty. So yeah, tune in to that, and thank you again.